What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson. And today we're once again talking about the New York Giants in the 2025 NFL Draft and going through a different scenario today. We've gone through a lot of them. What happens if this guy falls into the Giants' lap at number 3? What if they take a quarterback? What if they trade up for a quarterback? What if they take the best player available? We've pretty much discussed all of it, but one of the scenarios that we've kind of under-discussed is a potential trade down scenario. Is that even a possibility for the New York Giants? Would that be something that they realistically consider? I mean, obviously they need to address the quarterback position, and they likely want to do that with the number 3 overall pick in the draft. However, with the way that the rumors are swirling, with the way that players are falling down the board, other players are rising up the board, could this open up an opportunity for the New York Giants to consider trading down? That's what we're going to go ahead and discuss in today's episode. A very intriguing conversation, I think, because I think Alex and I both have different thoughts about how this could happen and why it might happen, but we'll go ahead and unpack it all nevertheless. So Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? What are your thoughts initially on the idea of the New York Giants trading down, and do you think it's a realistic possibility for them?
Man, the Giants trading down, that would be one hell of a turn of events. Now, I don't think it's likely to happen, but with that being said, you never really know with the Giants. They could do a variety of different things. We don't really know how they feel about these prospects in the first round, assuming that the first 2 quarterbacks are gone. I mean, you basically have the choice to go after a blue chip prospect, whether it be, a Travis Hunter. I mean, Abdul Carter, if he's not off the board in the first 2 picks, I'm taking Abdul Carter probably. Honestly, I mean, between him and Travis Hunter, it's tough. But I think I went Travis Hunter a couple days ago and we discussed who would we go with if that was the kind of discussion at hand, that was the choice at hand. I mean, Hunter's the generational prospect. No, he has years of experience playing CB, playing wide receiver. Abdul Carter is this is his first year as a legitimate pure pass rusher, and he looks to have like Micah Parsons upside. Maybe not as high as that, but he has the upside to be a legitimate all-pro outside linebacker in the NFL, and his versatility is not something that we should overlook either. So, if you're the Giants, passing on a blue chip prospect, it's a hell of a choice, and it really is a choice, because if you go back to 6, let's say, or rather 5, maybe the Raiders or the Jacksonville Jaguars want to move up to get one of those 2 guys, and you have all the cards now, it's an interesting debate, because if you're the Giants, do you pass on those 2 blue chippers? Do you elect to go and accumulate maybe an extra second-round pick this year to maybe land a Will Johnson or maybe land a Mason Graham? And that's kind of what we're discussing here is, do you see those guys as valuable enough? I mean, dude, let's be honest. Dexter Lawrence and Mason Graham would be absolutely insane together. Dexter Lawrence and Abdul Carter would be absolutely insane together. So, there's a variety of different things the Giants could do here, and it'd be totally fine. But is it worth a second-round pick? And I'll ask you this, Anthony, would you rather Mason Graham in a second-round pick or Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter? That's kind of what we're kind of debating right now if you want to discuss moving back a couple spots.
Yeah, and I think it's a really interesting debate. And to be honest, I'd probably prefer the blue chip prospect at number 3 than the trade down with the extra second round pick. And the reason why being the strength of the draft class in general. I don't think that this is a draft class that necessarily bodes well for teams with more volume. I think having higher picks in this class is important, but having more picks isn't necessarily the best thing because it's not the strongest draft class. Like, Alex, if we were talking about the 2024 draft last year, trading down would have been great for the Giants in many ways because that class was just loaded with talent. It feels like nearly every single first-round draft pick from last year's class is already hit. So you don't see that too often when draft classes are that strong. More often than not, you see draft classes like this one where finding those gems and finding those stars is a little bit trickier, and there is no guarantee in round 2. So me personally, you get the most guaranteed, or as close to the word of guarantee that you can use, thing is in round 1. But the idea of trading down is still something to discuss because it's something that the New York Giants could consider. Like you said, what if their target at number 3 overall is a quarterback? Okay, well, Cam Ward goes off the board to the Titans number 1, and the Browns take Shedeur Sanders number 2. The Giants don't have a conviction for Jackson Dart with the 3rd overall pick, so they decide, all right, you know what? Let's trade down. Let's move down the board and pick up some extra draft capital. And while I personally think that the Giants should go BPA at number 3 in that situation, if they are trading down just a couple of spots, like you said, Alex, maybe to number 5 or 6 overall, they're still landing an arguable blue chip player, right? I mean, if you're drafting Will Campbell out of LSU, he's one of the best pass protecting offensive linemen that have come out in the last 5 years, statistically speaking. He's an absolute beast. He could be a long-term solution for the New York Giants at right tackle if he's able to make the transition to the other side of the line. He could be an ideal selection if they do trade down. Plus, you're getting ideally a blue chip offensive lineman and a second round draft pick that you can utilize to address another need. So maybe that first second round pick that you have, you get a wide receiver or another offensive lineman, a defensive lineman, then you can still get a cornerback. So the Giants, if they are going for need in this NFL draft, Alex, then trading down does make sense. Now, I always argue you just take the best player available, and if the value is there for BPA, then you go BPA. However, the Giants' strategy over the last 3 years with Joe Schoen as their general manager has been to draft for need, to accumulate draft capital in a way that when you're on the clock, you can address one of the biggest holes on your roster and in your lineup. So if that's the logic and that's the thought process behind the 2025 NFL draft for the Giants, then trading down would allow them to achieve that goal a lot easier. Trading down gives them more flexibility to address more needs. So maybe you trade down a couple spots. You do land either a beast of an interior defensive lineman on Mason Graham, or a great pass protecting offensive tackle on a Will Campbell, or Kelvin Banks out of Texas. He's a guard prospect that could probably plug and play and start from day one for the New York Giants. These are all options for them if they trade down just a few spots. And then in round two, let's address two needs. That's totally an option. So, Alex, what are your thoughts on that? The fact that the Giants like to draft for need. Maybe you and I disagree with that. We like to go with the best guy on the board more often than not. But since the Giants like to trade down and make moves for needs, this might make a lot of sense for the Giants so that they can address more of those needs in round two.
Yeah, I mean, God knows we have a lot of them. So, when it all comes down to it, I do think if you're the Giants and you need a receiver, you need a cornerback, you need a defensive tackle, you could use some more depth on the outside at the outside linebacker position. We also have a free agent at strong safety in Jason Pinnock, so like you might want to address that spot. Like the Giants have needs across. I mean, dude, let's be honest. 3 years in, we have this many needs. It's not very encouraging at this point in time, and the fact that we're gonna have to trade down to address some of them, or like we're considering that option in a bad draft class with only maybe a handful of first round graded players is very concerning. And we all know this, though. This is nothing surprising. But, I do think that if you're the Giants and you could move back a couple spots, like, I think it might be worth it. If you walked away with Mason Graham next to Dexter Lawrence, you have the best defensive line in football, or arguably with Brian Burns. I know Kayvon's like, he's average, let's say slightly above average maybe. He's not going to break the bank for you. He's not going to, I guess, define a postseason game for you most likely. Maybe 2 years ago when he had a couple of really big clutch moments, but it's been far and few between since then. I think Brian Burns is capable of those type of moments. He's obviously very, very tough battle through injury this whole past season. But if you had a defensive line that had Kayvon, Brian Burns, Dexter Lawrence, and Mason Graham, you're dangerous on defense. Like that's enough. You could piece together your secondary, be like, all right, like we can survive with this. Obviously that's not ideal. I'd like to go out and get somebody, but that's just kind of the perspective of like, you don't have the unlimited resources to address every single position. So if you walked away with Mason Graham and then the second round, you could land, a Trey Harris, or you could land, I don't know, like a Jaden Higgins, and you walked away with like a Jonah Savanaia, an offensive guard and a wide receiver in the second round. So now you've addressed your interior defensive tackle with the best player at the position in the draft class. You've addressed your guard position with a very high upside player that could be a versatile piece long term, and you get a receiver who's obviously really, really, really talented in terms of his upside and his athletic traits. You just don't have a quarterback. So like who's throwing in the ball, of course, you'd have to spend on a good bridge, whether that be a Justin Fields, whether that be a Russell Wilson, whether it be a Kirk Cousins, whether that be a Sam Darnold. That's yet to be seen. But let's be honest with each other, Anthony. The Giants are drafting a quarterback in this year's draft class. Like they're taking a quarterback. If they move back, it's because they probably want to use that one of those second round picks and even maybe both of those second round picks to package up and go get Jackson Dart. And that's kind of the thing. You don't have to use future draft capital to get Jackson Dart in this instance, or use current draft capital to move up in the later rounds. You could say, I'm going to move back if those two quarterbacks are off the board and Sanders and Ward, move back, get an extra second round pick, use those second round picks to move up and get Jackson Dart, and then take the best player available at 3, or rather at 5 or 6, depending on how far you move back. So I think to get another second round pick and you're going to give up Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter in this instance, you're probably getting a second round pick to move back a couple spots. And in that case, I do think you walk away with a Mason Graham and a Jackson Dart. Is that something you'd be happy with? Or are you more willing to say, I'm going to take the best player available at 3, whether that's Carter or Hunter, and then use future or, our current draft capital to move up to get Jackson Dart in the first round? Or are you just okay not getting Dart at all and just, running the risk of just having a bridge without a quarterback? It's so many questions that become apparent when you move back. That's why I think it's so unlikely. I do have a scenario I want to float to you after you answer that question, though.
If the Giants walk out of this draft without selecting a quarterback, I would lose my mind. So, if the question is, would I be happy if they traded down and still just, didn't take Jackson Dart if they had the opportunity to? No, I would be very angry. They need to draft a quarterback in this draft, whether it's Shador at 3, Cam at 3, trading up to 1, whether it's trading down and taking Dart. The Giants need to draft a quarterback. So, to plainly answer that question, Alex, no, I would not be happy if the Giants didn't make a move for a quarterback in the first couple rounds of this draft. This is one of those situations where the Giants have gone 6 years without drafting a quarterback. It has to be, I haven't fact checked it, but I have to imagine that's the longest that any team has gone without drafting a quarterback. They didn't exactly have Tom Brady back there. They had Daniel Jones. What prevented the New York Giants from throwing a 5th round draft pick at a quarterback over the last 6 years? Absolutely nothing other than malpractice, gross negligence, whatever you want to describe it as, bad general managing. That's what has caused the New York Giants to go this long without a quarterback, and that's why they don't even have a single quarterback under contract for the 2025 season. Now, I'm not saying that they should have taken a first-round quarterback and back-to-back, nothing like that, but over the last 6 years, seriously, they haven't taken a single quarterback prospect in any of the 7 rounds of the NFL draft. That's why they don't have a quarterback under contract. That's why they don't have a legitimate backup to their starter. Why they didn't have a backup plan when Daniel Jones went down with an injury in 2023. Why they didn't have a backup plan this year when they decided to release Daniel Jones mid-season. They didn't have a legitimate backup plan because they never drafted a quarterback in 6 years. It's gross negligence, and they need to correct that. So no matter what, whether they're drafting one at 3, trading up, trading down, I don't care. The New York Giants better call a quarterback's name during those 3 days in April that the NFL draft is taking place. So that's my number one answer to that question, Alex. But to the other question, if they do trade down 2 spots and they land a Mason Graham, it's exciting, right? You're still getting an extra draft pick, whether that's used to trade up and draft Dart or if it's used to address more needs in the second round, whatever. I don't care. But that is an exciting proposition just because the draft at the end of the day is a crapshoot, and the more picks that you have, the more likely you are to hit on some of those draft picks. At least that's the case for most general managers, good ones at least. We don't know about Joe Schoen and the New York Giants, not to be too negative here, but they have thrown a lot of darts, so to speak, at many boards across the last 3 drafts, and they haven't hit on a ton of those draft picks, so it's hard to trust that more picks makes things better for them, and that's why, again, I lean towards your highest pick being spent on the best player possible. Though that strategy also hasn't necessarily worked for the Giants. Like in 2022, they went BPA and it didn't exactly work out for them there either. So I think there's a lot that's on the table for the New York Giants right now in early February is where we are. But again, Alex, my number one thing out of all of the questions you asked me there, the Giants have to draft a quarterback. Whether it's in round 1, round 2, round 7, I don't care. If they walk out of this draft without drafting a quarterback, I will be livid.
Yeah, and since you've been talking, Anthony, I've been made aware of 2 different things that have quite drastically impacted this conversation. One thing, actually. Myles Garrett of the Browns has just forced a trade from Cleveland.
Requested.
So okay, request. But he's not gonna. He'll hold out. Like he won't play for them. In my opinion, like you don't request a trade if you're in any sense of the word, sticking around. So, I do think that he's going to be like, you're trading me, and somebody will go acquire this player for multiple first-round picks, and the Browns need it. Now, this impacts our conversation, Anthony, because the Browns, if they lose their best defensive player, now they are in full-fledged rebuild mode. And, I mean, they kind of already are, let's be honest with ourselves, but that makes the probability of them taking a quarterback very high. I think it's decently high. I mean, they could.
It's always
BPA.
been high.
Maybe Abdul Carter replace him.
I think that this opens up more of an opportunity for them to draft Abdul Carter.
It definitely does.
Carter is a tremendous player. Some have given him that generational label, and the Cleveland Browns have had a lot of rumors swirling around that they would prefer to go the veteran quarterback route, and that with the number 2 overall pick, they don't necessarily see quarterback being the best position available, so they would prefer to take a BPA and go with a veteran, whether that's a Kirk Cousins or whoever. I know that the idea of reuniting Kirk Cousins with Kevin Stefanski has been a very popular one. The Browns could absolutely make a trade or sign Kirk Cousins on a very low-cost deal. Go ahead and take the BPA. And now with Myles Garrett wanting out, taking that best player available might mean taking that potential generational pass rusher with the number 2 overall pick in Abdul Carter. So I think that's what this really opens up, especially considering if the Browns were to do this, trade Myles Garrett away, Alex, they would probably gain an additional first round pick that could be used on Jackson Dart later in the first round. So that's what I would actually look at as the fallout of this one. This could be Abdul Carter plus
makes
Dart
sense.
to Cleveland. Dart getting some time to sit under Kirk Cousins potentially before becoming the starter. Meanwhile, they're just going to say F you to Deshaun Watson, get him out of there as they should, get him out of the league. But this is what I think that opens up more than anything. I think the probability of them drafting a quarterback at 2 is already high. This doesn't change that. This, to me, changes the probability of them potentially going BPA.
It does, unless the Titans take Carter 1, which would definitely shake things up. So if they took Carter 1, I think they probably go Cam Ward 2. But if they go Cam Ward 1, I could see Carter going 2nd overall. That does make a lot of sense.
I also could see a situation here where, if we're assuming that these general managers are going to follow the plans that they've laid out, meaning the Titans are going to go with the generational talent. That's what they said. They could take Travis Hunter. The Browns now could take Abdul Carter. This could open the door for Cam Ward to slip to number 3 overall for the New York Giants if they believe he is the best quarterback in this draft class, as we do, and as pretty much everybody else seems to think as well. Now, we know that the Giants seem to be in love with Shedeur Sanders. There are some who believe he is number 1 on their board among the quarterbacks, even ahead of Cam Ward. I don't know if I believe that. I think that the Giants are smart enough to know that Cam Ward is the best quarterback prospect in this class. At least that's the consensus. So I think that this actually does increase the probability of a couple of things. Number one, that the Browns could go with Abdul Carter at number 2. And number 2 being that Cam Ward could actually now realistically fall into the lap of the New York Giants. I actually think, Alex, how you opened it up saying that this puts the Browns in full rebuild mode actually decreases their chances of drafting a quarterback. If they truly are blowing it up and going into full rebuild mode, potentially picking up future first-round draft picks that could be used to draft a quarterback in 2026 or 27 by trading away Myles Garrett. You know he's going to go for several first-round picks, most likely. I actually think this decreases their chances of drafting a quarterback at number 2 and increases their likelihood to just continue fully rebuilding their roster until eventually plugging in a star generational hopeful quarterback prospect down the line. That's where I think this will lead the Cleveland Browns if they do decide to grant him the permission and go through with his request and trade away Myles Garrett.
Yeah, that's totally possible. If they wanted to restock and go BPA in the first round right now, and then maybe take a chance on Dart late in the first, or just keep all their draft capital and wait until 2026 and try to make a big move for a quarterback then. I mean, they're going to be bad next year. Let's be honest. They don't have a quarterback right now, and they lose Myles Garrett. They're going to win, and they only won 4 games this year. Like, they're going to be garbage next season. So if that's the case, maybe it is in their best interest to wait for a quarterback and just keep adding talent, like blue chip talent, to the equation. I mean, obviously, they now become trade down candidates in this instance because they could look to restock or just, there's a lot of things the Browns could do right now that could really mess with the Giants' plans. If they want to trade down and the Raiders want Sanders, they can move up to 2 and there could be quarterbacks off the board, bang, bang. If they want Abdul Carter, they could go in that direction as well. The Giants now find themselves in a very precarious position because I don't really know what anyone's going to do. Do the Titans like Cam Ward enough to take him 1st overall? Do the Browns like Cam Ward enough to take him 2nd overall, having lost their best defensive player? I mean, assuming they do lose him. So very interesting scenarios unfolding for the Giants around them right now, and that's why we were so upset about winning a meaningless game against the Colts, because now we have to determine our whole, or at least I was upset, their whole draft plans now get influenced by other teams who both need quarterbacks. So it's a very difficult position to be in. I think that Sanders will be there 3rd overall. I'd say there's a 80% chance he's there 3rd overall. That's how I personally feel. I think there's a 60 to 70% chance he's there at 5th overall if they wanted to even move back. And that's kind of a scenario that I wanted to float to you. And I know it's a risky one, and it's probably not one the Giants will ever consider. But if there was an avenue for the Giants to trade back to 5, where the Jacksonville Jaguars could leapfrog the Patriots for Travis Hunter, that's a scenario where I think the Giants can add another 2nd-round pick and let Sanders 5th overall because the Pats don't need a quarterback. I know the Raiders do, and they can move up, but the Patriots may want to go with BPA in that instance, they may want to go with Mason Graham, who's been mocked to them on many occasions. So, it's possible they could probably still land Mason Graham if they move back to 6 anyway, which is, the counter argument to that. But is that a risk that I don't think Joe Shane will make this risk? I don't think it's a worthwhile risk to make if you like and have conviction in a player. But it would be interesting to see if the Giants felt confident they can move back 2 spots, still get Sanders, and then add a second round pick to their equation to add more talent to this roster.
Yeah, and I think that's, definitely something to open up a conversation about, and I'll give my take on it. But I also think, with this potential trade down that we could see, or whatever, just this Myles Garrett domino potentially falling, could that open up, Alex, a potential trade for the New York Giants up 1 spot to draft their quarterback? Could that make the Browns more open to trading down just a pick? Just moving down 1 spot and saying, hey, all right, you know what? We just traded away our best player. We're not in position to draft a quarterback, so we're going to allow the New York Giants to move up. We're going to take an extra pick from them. Meanwhile, we've got extra picks from trading Myles Garrett. We're just going to keep stockpiling picks and try and build for the future. So, you know what, New York, you can move up 1 spot. Just give us your 3rd round pick, something cheap, and go ahead and take your quarterback there. We just want the extra capital in the middle rounds. I think that's another thing that this could open up, as well as this, Alex. I think this is going to be a big talking point. Is Dion really going to let his son go to the Cleveland Browns? Meanwhile, they're trading away their best player. I don't think so. You said you think it's at least an 80% chance that Shedeur Sanders falls to the New York Giants at number 3 overall. Yeah, I think at least 80%. In fact, I think this news really increases the probability even further, maybe up to 90%. I don't think there's any chance that the Cleveland Browns feel comfortable enough putting Shedeur Sanders in this situation and taking him at number 2 overall. And I don't think there's any chance that Dion will want his son to go there. So since Dion has stated it very clearly, several things, that he will get involved and prevent his son from going to certain franchises, and that he doesn't want his kids playing in a cold weather state like Ohio, I think this really does signal that Shedeur Sanders will not go to the Cleveland Browns with the number 2 overall pick in the NFL draft. I think that's probably one of the bigger takeaways to have from this potential fallout in this trade here. So very interesting stuff. There really was so much fallout that we just kind of briefly discussed here from that Myles Garrett news, and I'm sure that a bunch of different shows are going to be talking about that. That is major news. I mean, the world of sports is pretty wild right now. We had the Luka Doncic to the Lakers trade recently. Now we've got Myles Garrett requesting a trade. Who knows what else goes down? We already know that there are a bunch of big stars around the NFL on the trade block entering this offseason, particularly at wide receiver with DK Metcalf, with Cooper Kupp, with Tyreek Hill. It's shaping up to be a very, very interesting offseason in the NFL, and I'm super excited for it. And just makes the coverage that we're going to have here on this channel even more exciting for me. Like, I just can't wait for the offseason to really kick off. But the question that you asked me, it was about trading down and still trying to land Shedeur. I'm sorry, it took me a second to get there. There's so much to take away from this Myles Garrett news. But trading down and potentially still landing Shedeur, I think, is just very unlikely. I think that the Las Vegas Raiders and their rumored conviction in Shedeur is very strong. I think that Tom Brady stepping into that ownership group is the reason that Pete Carroll is there, and I think it's the reason that the Raiders will draft a quarterback in this first round of this year's draft, and I think it's why they're going to be targeting Shedeur Sanders of all players. However, for the New York Giants, if you hear somewhere around the league Tom Brady doesn't like Shedeur, maybe he doesn't think he's a franchise quarterback, the Raiders aren't going to take him in the first round, maybe you do try and get a little bit tricky and trade down and still land Shedeur. But I would argue, Alex, that's the definition of getting a little too cute and exposing yourself to potential vulnerabilities. So I can't imagine that would be something the Giants entertain. But, if they're not sold on Shedeur Sanders and they'd rather just trade down and, hey, if he happens to land in our laps, we'll take him. If he doesn't, then so be it. Then maybe they could trade down and try and target him. I think that everything is just really on the table, though, for the Giants. And I think that makes that news that we just got about Myles Garrett makes that even more evident. Everything truly is on the table.
Yeah. So here's my hot take as we kind of round out this episode. My hot take, Anthony, is that both Cam Ward and Sanders will be available at 3rd overall. Watching their tape, watching these players, there's too many red flags for them to be bona fide, number 1 picks for me. They're not worth that comparably to Carter and Travis Hunter, in my opinion. They're worth taking chances on at 3 for the Giants, but the Titans would be taking a gargantuan risk with either of those 2 players 1st overall. But I get, because it's the quarterback position, you have to take those gambles. I think that Travis Hunter goes 1st overall, and I think that Abdul Carter goes 2. And I think that the Giants have their choice of Cam or Sanders at 3. That's personally how I think things are going to unfold. I don't think that I don't think the teams are as high on the quarterbacks as they were in the previous couple years in the draft. You know what I mean? And I think that there's only a handful of blue chippers in this draft class, and passing on them would be ludicrous for most teams. I know the Titans need a quarterback, but they also like just fired Rand Carthon, and he like just strapped them with bad contracts. Like whoever's taking that job is in a world of trouble. They need to restock, rebuild, restructure that team. They need to rebuild the foundation really, because they spent so much money on L'Jarius Sneed's good, but he sucked this year. And then they also spent a big bag on Calvin Ridley, who was underwhelming, but looked better down the stretch. I don't know. They're kind of an interesting situation. But I could totally see the Titans going BPA and getting like a veteran bridge to like come in. I don't even think Sam Darnold's that crazy for them. I know they have a lot of money tied up, but they also said already Will Levis is going to get a chance to compete for that job. So you're going to bring in Cam Ward to compete with Will Levis. I think they bring in a veteran to compete with Will Levis, and I know that's obviously easier said than done because Cam could easily be the first overall pick. But my hot take is that the Giants will have the choice of Cam or Shadur third overall, and I think that that's not actually the craziest thing to consider.
Yeah, I mean, this totally does open up the opportunity for the Giants to draft anyone, like either of those two quarterbacks in number 3 overall. This is just so interesting, so much fallout from this. But you're right. Like, I don't think that either of those teams picking 1 and 2 are fully committed to taking a quarterback in the top 2. We have heard a lot about Cam Ward, and we have heard a lot about Shador, and that they're varying on different teams' draft boards. Sounds like the consensus is Cam Ward is the number 1 quarterback in the class, although it also sounds like not everybody views him as a first-round pick. A lot of people view him as a second-round pick that they're just going to take in the first round out of need and necessity, because that's the nature of the quarterback position. So is it possible that the best players go off the board 1 and 2, being Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter? Absolutely. Could that open up the opportunity for the New York Giants to draft the best quarterback in the draft class? It sure as shit does. So this is going to be really exciting, Alex. I'm so thrilled that this is the wild NFL offseason that we're stepping into, and I'm glad that we have so many loyal viewers of the channel, who are especially new ones, who've been coming in and really enjoying our draft coverage that we got started nice and early for you guys. At the time we started our draft coverage a little early, Alex, people said, man, it's only December. Why are you already talking about the draft? It's all the way in April. Well, you know what? All that homework that we were doing then, it's really starting to pay off now, and it's only going to continue to bear fruits of its labor as we get closer and closer to the draft. So I'm excited. And now, again, reminder that it's not just the NFL draft that makes the offseason so exciting. It's free agency as well, and free agency spurs a lot of trades, which could see blockbuster moves like this Myles Garrett deal get done. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Make sure you guys are tuned into the channel throughout the offseason. Make sure you leave a like if you enjoyed this episode. Subscribe if you're new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, make sure to leave us a 5-star review. And go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, we'll catch you on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.